Today's episode is brought to you by the Sounds in Cinema podcast and the Brew Bar. The Everything Sequel podcast contains explicit language. 'Cause we learned it from you, Dad. Joining me for this last Apes movie, before we pitch sequels, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Hello, Tom.
Yes, it has been rather boring, hasn't it? I think the characters in this movie severely underestimate how dramatically interesting the interim period between this and the last movie's been.
I'll say.
I mean, both John Huston as the lawgiver and Culp kind of skip over it. This is a time in which apes have taken over the world and there's been a nuclear winter. That seems like interesting stuff to me.
And the characters make it seem like, oh, ho-hum.
Well, my theory is that, I think the ape scriptures are based on what they have footage of. That's what makes it in there. If they don't have any footage of it never happened.
Yeah. Right. It couldn't possibly have happened.
Yeah,
because we don't have enough money to shoot it.
Yeah,
ourselves, and so if we don't have found footage from some previous ape movie,
and that will come up again. That limited availability of footage is a recurring theme with this movie.
I'll say.
They blow up the same tree quite a few times.
Like a dozen times. I love it so much. I fucking love it.
You really do love this movie.
I do.
And I'm still fascinated by that.
I get it. Like, especially after talking through our last films, it starts making me think, oh, yeah.
But you know what? I want to kind of, I want to sort of interrogate you a little more about what was the name of that thing that kind of hairdryer that they put on Armando's head? What was it called?
Oh, dang it!
The Truthinator. Let's just call it the Truthinator.
No, it's not the Truthinator. It's the Authenticator. That's what
it is. The Authenticator. Yeah. Oh yes, big difference. I want to do that to you because I think your perspective on this movie is the most valuable, and I've been a real Armando for these past few movies. So blah 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 blah. Apes, 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 apes.
I can't deny you your rightful position.
No, I know.
The lover of this series.
It's a big series in my life, but still, I think you are onto some because I'll say it. I think. I often think of this movie as a kind of formality in the series. I feel like it's I watch it more as a button on the series than a movie in its own right. And I think you've reversed that, and you're watching it as a movie
with fresh eyes or something like that. Yeah,
fresh eyes, 2021 eyes, and it's made me reevaluate a movie that I'd always kind of dismissed, ignored.
I think I might disappoint you in what I latch onto in this movie, but by all means, I'm willing to.
You can't disappoint. This is Planet of the Apes, Mike. You cannot disappoint me, no matter what you say.
But I think I mentioned even in our ranking episode, because when I said that this was my second favorite movie in the series, and you, like, hands to your head.
No, I just never heard anyone articulate those words before. That is literally it. But the more I think about it, the more I feel like I have neglected what is a perfectly good movie.
I do think it's that.
With some serious fringe problems, but they are fringe problems.
But all these movies have fringe problems. Well, I guess that's not exactly true.
I don't think as much. Overall, I'd say the thing that always put me off this movie was it feels slighter compared to the other movies. Mm-hmm. But I'm starting to reevaluate even that because
to me it's more straightforward in narrative.
Right. Which is not to be sniffed at. I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely not to be sniffed at, especially in a series which has, taken us forward and backwards and forward in time already.
Yeah, right.
It's nice just to get a nice little bit of linear, you know, Aristotelian unity storytelling in the middle of this.
Well, and
you know?
it's funny because in terms of the time, because this movie starts in 2670 AD.
Yes.
And I think I missed what the caregiver had said about, so back then in 1991 or whatever, you know, just after 1991.
Yeah, because you didn't miss it. John Huston mumbles it into a scroll.
Yeah, goes, exactly.
And nuclear winter and apes took over. Bye.
And I missed that. And so, and then the story starts in earnest with Caesar. And I thought, wait, what? Wait, what's happening? Caesar's alive in 2670? What the fuck is going on? And I was so confused. And I had to go back and watch it again. And I was like, oh, okay.
That's the first note I have that it's a fake out that we're starting where we began in the series.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also an assertion that we're now definitely in an alternate timeline. Because there's been a sense of that before, but it's very clear that we're on because we start with Cornelius and Zira coming to 1972. That's where the recap begins.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's the clearest statement we've had so far of this timeline is not going to join up with itself.
Right.
We're although we still need to avoid the same problems that we faced in the future that will never happen.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
Which to me, I mean, it's a fascinating line that many future filmmakers will also kind of plug, I think.
True. Yeah.
J.J. Abrams, with the Star Wars
stand up and be
timeline.
Recognized. J.J.
Same thing.
Yeah.
X-Men, same thing.
Sure. Yeah, you're right.
Alternate sort of using time travel as a reboot mechanism.
I mean, it's a convention now.
It's a convention now, but this has got to be the first.
Right.
Normally, I'm hedging my bets on that because someone will come to me and say, "Oh, 1921's whatever, Napoleon versus the Wolfman," but it's like, but with this one, I feel like
it's solid ground. I'm on solid ground. I'm building my house on top of granite.
That's right.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about the 1973 sequel, Battle for the Planet of the Apes, again directed by J. Lee Thompson, which I also find interesting, juxtaposing this movie with the last movie, which he also directed.
Right.
And I think we mentioned Guns of the Navarone, Cape Fear, Huckleberry Finn, a lot of Bronson movies, and Firewalker. This movie had 36% on Rotten Tomatoes, Tom. Again, we're taking... Did we slash budget? This movie goes up by $100,000. Last one was 1.7.
Really?
This one's 1.8. I think it was all spent on the explosion of that one tree, though.
Well, it's interesting because, I assume that the budget has gone down, but the more I learn about the way these movies were made, the more I think is that it's all relative to how much ape makeup you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
So in the last movie they had a lot to do as well, but that's when you start.
Yeah, but it's more. It has to do more with who's in close up, as opposed to far away. Like, are they because like in the last movie and this
that's
movie,
true.
So many people are just wearing masks, and they're dimming.
This is all in the daytime, and you've got to see everyone close up. You're right, but it's because in the Behind the Planet of the Apes, Frank Capra Jr. Says it's not an issue of money; it's an issue of time. The more ape makeup we have to do, the less time we have to do everything else, and the more money we run out of quicker.
Sure.
And so
literally just burning daylight.
it's not just about budget. It's basically it's about how many apes you have to render in your movie, which is why again Escape is the sweet spot.
Yeah, right.
In so many respects, but also economically because you can have a smaller budget because you've only got 3 apes to do.
You're allowed. You benefit from. There's a frugality through story.
But J. Lee Thompson reported that he he had to go. His 2 techniques for hiding the budget limitations were close up and fast cutting.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of think he should have come up with a third. There's got to be a filmmaking technique that can at least suggest that there's more than 3 people attacking the ape village at a time. Right? There's got to be a way to sort of fudge that cinematically.
Well, they didn't have the computer capability to reproduce people in a Lord of the Rings type way.
I would have taken scarecrows like on the horizon if that's what it took.
Right.
I'm fine with that. I just think he was kind of satisfied that he'd sort of hidden some of the limitations, and I think.
Well, it's funny because like when they at the end when
that.
when they're shooting into the school bus, you think, man,
say no more.
If there were any people in there, that would look incredibly violent.
I'd say that goes for every battle scene in this movie. If there were people in there, this would be one scary scene.
But I forgive it for all of that because I understand the budget limitations. And despite a $1.8 million budget in the USA and the world, it made $8.8 million.
Yeah.
And spent 2 weeks at #1 in the box office.
That's right. People were still going apeshit, for want of a better term, over these movies.
Well played, sir. This movie is only a couple $100,000 off what Conquest had made, and so they're still turning profits. But by now, maybe the returns are diminishing enough that they had already planned to go to television.
Well, maybe we'll talk in the next episode about the post Apes era and how important that is, but this is there was a slight slump, but the popularity of these movies went right back on top very quickly for a very specific reason. We'll talk about in the next episode.
All right.
So stay tuned. I mean, turn off and turn back on. Sorry.
But not yet.
Not yet. As I said, this is not radio.
Can we please talk about, to me, John Huston as an orangutan is like an incredible get.
It's a huge star.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the biggest star names they've ever had. I guess they're able to have more stars in this movie because it's people who are not doing their real jobs.
Right, exactly.
But
John
I guess
Huston
is a famous director, not actor. And John Landis will become a famous director.
Director eventually, right. He's in this movie as well.
Paul Williams is a songwriter. Again, not really an actor.
Right.
But so maybe that's the trick. But yeah, I mean, I know even at the time it was a huge deal.
Now, I assume, do you have enough background information on the making of these movies? Like, was he a huge fan of them, or what brought him?
Oh, Mike, he could have done this in an afternoon, right? Right?
Yeah.
He's looking. First of all, basically, it's like he's doing a game show. He's looking directly into camera and reading. Probably an auto cue there, right?
But I marvel at the fact that he clearly sat for hours to get that makeup on.
They got it down to
a bare minimum amount of work. Yeah,
I think they got it down to 90 minutes. I think was the quickest they could do it in by the end.
No kidding.
Yeah, but it's still a day's work, and let's face it, most of that the sequence he's in is recaps of old footage from the movies.
Oh yeah.
It's a good. So this movie is is already very short, and at least 5 minutes of it, conservatively, is old footage.
More sequel, more sequel
it's
conventions.
well, right. I'm gonna say it's right in the little boy penis territory.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, in honor of Paul Williams, I have renamed Little Boy Enos.
I got to tell you, out of context, the verbiage.
I know
the verbiage we've come up with for. It's like...
and it's sequences
Little boy
like
penis
this.
again. Everyone, we're talking Superman 2.
It's sequences like this that make me want to think about this movie more as a sort of testimonial, a kind of wrapping up of the series, than a movie in its own right. But you've made me sort of shift that perspective, and I'm really glad you did. But there is a sense in which, you know, you could watch this movie as just a way of just putting a button on everything that we've seen so far in the series. And the narrative works better in that sense, but it doesn't mean that it still doesn't work as a movie. As, you know, just an independent piece of storytelling. But everything about this movie is sort of saying that you shouldn't take it too seriously. You shouldn't think of it as like one of the big hitters in the series. But in that,
don't you think that's more just a reflection of the scope they're not able to bring to it due to money constraints? Like the ideas behind it are there?
Partially, but I also think, I mean, they knew this was going to be the last Apes movie going into production, and I can definitely see that, you know, they're trying to write a story that you know, scenes that are mirror images of plot lines from other sequels. They're basically trying to work. They're working through all of the 5 movies in this movie, and trying to speak to all of it. I think that is very deliberate because they knew it was the final chapter, as it says on the poster.
Yeah,
the final chapter. So it does have that kind of conclusionary feel to it. But it's interesting that, and I think I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what interests me about it, coming at it with, you know, seeing it through your eyes. Sorry, I sound like Roy Batty here. Is that this is one of the, you know, within this movie, in the parts that aren't simply homage, you have one of the strongest pieces of original storytelling. And
that's what appeals to me the most.
And you're right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And it's hard to see that. It's hard to see the ape village for the trees, is what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, I mean, you asked me to talk about this movie and what appeals so much for me.
Yeah.
And that bit of storytelling, to me, is maybe the best storytelling in the entire series.
Yeah.
And why it raises this movie up to number 2 for me, because that part of it is so good. Now, the only thing that they kind of like shoot themselves in the foot with is, it's so amazing to me what this series does in terms of when we go to escape from the Planet of the Apes and we have this narrative bit about Aldo said no. And then in this movie, they changed that to he said no.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah, well, it's an alternate timeline.
To me, it's just a fuck up.
We need that diagram of infinite regression again. Just to sort of
I need Doc Brown to pull out his fucking chalkboard.
We need Dr. Hasline to very slowly explain it all to us.
Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, you know,
because you have a character whose name is Aldo in this movie. That's the inexplicable thing to me, that you set up Aldo as the savior, then you make Caesar the savior, and then you have a character called Aldo in this movie.
Yes. Well, I by no means think that Carl Sagan is the person writing this movie. However, I do think that you can explain, even if it's headcanon, you can sort of explain away those inconsistencies, which are probably just inconsistencies, with
But
the
they're
basic
huge,
mechanics.
Tom. They're huge.
They're basic mechanics of time, of like, alternate timelines.
Right.
I mean, you know, they when
So are you
Cornelius.
really saying that, like...
I'm saying that I've always thought this. I'm not saying it's true.
Uh-huh.
It's never been a problem for me because this movie.
You think, like, what happens in, say, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, them coming back, like, that the person that they know that was Caesar really was Aldo, but that just the
No.
mere coming back changed the timeline?
No, I think they're going back into their own timeline and changing it.
All right.
And that these are because, the way you've put it, one sounds like a mirror image of the other. It's like a parallel universe now.
Yeah.
And the parallel universe is a human says no to an ape instead of an ape saying no to the human. And whether they intended it or not, you can pattern that around all the, dichotomies in this movie. It's all about, it goes from ape to human, human to ape, back again. And now, now we're back. But we're in I don't know how many times I'd say this. We're in an alternate timeline. Like, everything is different. To me,
And
the problem is that they're so afraid of the same things happening that they have already avoided by creating an alternate timeline.
Right.
That's what bothers me.
Can I ask you this,
But that's
too?
probably because they're not... It's not really an alternate timeline. It's just what I've done in my head to make these movies make sense.
To make them work for your own head? All right, fine. To me, it's like a narrative fuck-up.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's again. I think one of the traits of sequels that we keep bumping into is the inability to sort of keep your story straight from movie to movie. Even, and I would actually say especially when the movies are all made within a year of each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we find exactly the same problem with Halloween. It's like,
Furious
this should be the smoothest transition between, Halloween 4 and 5 should be like the smoothest transition
and
between
it's not.
movies in continuity. And it's the worst, probably, in the whole series. And the same is kind of, all these movies are a year apart, and yet they can't get their story straight as to what happens in the history of this fictional universe we're creating.
Yeah.
They just can't do it. Maybe they just don't want to do it. I mean, we care more about those things now than I think they did in the early 70s. I think that
might be true. But, and like you said, I think part of what informs that is this idea of there was no VHS, there were not even beta. Like, we didn't have a way to, like, rewatch this stuff over and over and over again.
Yeah, and there's I think less of a sense that, well, it's interesting because this film series will, I think, more out of marketing than anything else, will eventually create the idea of a film series that you should watch these movies back to back, in the way that they're released and marketed later after the movies were post release. But in terms of that being a question of story and continuity, it's not. I don't think it's a huge priority here.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that this is why time travel, I think, is so attractive to people writing and creating franchises, is that it covers a multitude of sins when it comes to inconsistencies and implausibilities.
All right. I'm curious about this, though, because I don't think we talked about it in the last episode. For Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, I was, if I was going to lay a bet, I was 100% sure that at some point Caesar would say, "Keep your damn dirty hands off me."
Yeah, again, I think that's like that would be the J.J. Abrams version of it. You know what I mean? It's like,
So I guess that was what I was asking you, was that, like, is it because of the movie conventions of today that I thought
Yeah.
that for the movie back, that would happen back then?
what this series is really great at, and what future movie series have never really picked up, is that, you can, and they wouldn't have even called it fan service at this point, but you can have those sort of callback fan service moments, but you don't need to, like, drive them into the ground.
Yeah.
Like, we get so many of those kind of like parallels and allusions and callbacks to what's happened in previous movies, but they're not knocking you over the head with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's like organically part of the story.
Part of the story, right?
We don't stop a scene for it to happen, and I think that's what's. I mean, there's a great example of it in here. I think when Caesar goes back to the city of misfit toys, and he looks at a picture of a picture I don't know how anyone got of Cornelius,
Right.
and he's the same actor is looking at himself, a picture of himself, and saying that's my father, and those kind of like, they understand it on the level of in jokes, just like throwaway moments like that, but they really are throwaway moments. It's not like Rise of Skywalker where we have to stop the movie to
point it out,
fan service,
yeah,
to point out something from a previous movie.
All right.
Yeah, I think that even the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes, maybe that's the turning point, and then the Caesar trilogy of the 2010s, they do a lot of that kind of very on the nose, allusions to the Planet of the Apes mythology.
All right. Well,
and here I just think it's part of the storytelling. Like, it's part of it grows out of the storytelling.
if you like podcasts like I do, boy, do I have a treat for you. You need to
stay on target
and check out the Sounds and Cinema podcast. Listen as your host, sound designer and music creator Tony Parham, and co-host, musical performer and sound lover Derek Hansen, D-Rock if you're nasty, and I am, discuss all things sound related to film, television, stage, and theatrical productions. They discuss environmental sounds, bioacoustics, dialogue, the nature of communication through sound, but as an added bonus, they drink beer and try to
stay on target.
Find them wherever you get your podcasts and listen to the pure mania of a man who can charitably be described as Doug, the dog from Up, and another man with a soothing and sultry voice trying to get that man to
stay on target.
That's the Sounds and Cinema podcast. Tune in and listen to the sounds they are creating just for you. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here discussing Battle for the Planet of the Apes, the J. Lee Thompson film. You love that title.
Yeah, and I don't know if I can separate it from my nostalgia for the comic book vinyl read-along version that I owned as a child, but I can just whenever I hear that title, I can see the font of the title on the comic book. But it just I don't know, it gets to it's like, I like the fact there's not a the there,
right?
Or like it's just as like,
well,
if
there
it
are
was the
two
Battle for the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
It suggests that, actually it's kind of accurate as well, because it feels like it's just one battle,
Exactly.
That really is true. It is like, yeah, you would describe this as a battle, not a war, for sure.
If this was called War for the Planet of the Apes,
a later title,
it would maybe change my ranking.
Yes. It should be, in fact, the perfect title would be Skirmish for the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, exactly.
Although battle does suggest that
skirmish
there is
a funny word.
Yeah, it is. Battle does suggest there is some kind of competition going on here, which I don't get from the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I can't deny that.
Aside from their ability to blow up the same tree multiple times, which is magic.
So good. I have like 14 cameras set up on that tree.
And the same zoom in and fast cut away from.
They spend like half their budget on cameras.
It really surprised me that J. Lee Thompson, I mean, he was a much older man, but he was like, yeah, I covered it. Yeah, I did. I was like, I fucking never covered it. You blew up a tree and then filmed it 16 times. That's not covering it.
Oh, man, that's great. Well, as the narrative of our story starts, we come to understand that we have Ape Sanctuary, Ape Village, Ape.
They keep calling it city, but village again.
I was gonna say Ape
it's
City,
not a war,
but...
it's a battle. It's not a city,
right.
It's a village. Everything is one smaller.
And there seemed to be within the village. There seemed to be two factions, and Aldo. Oh, fucking love. Just having Claude Akins. Sheriff Lobo from my childhood.
Do you know what? I mean, Sheriff Lobo, yes, Claude Akins. There was a moment of acting from Aldo that I bet you love.
What?
I would bet money on that this was the moment that you fell in love with this movie.
You're probably right.
So Caesar and Virgil and McDonald's brother.
Right.
We'll get into that in a minute. They're walking through the village. Aldo comes up to them. They kind of blind him with puns and verbal trickery, and he does like a full body double take.
Right.
He goes like that, and I thought that both reminds me of you and the things that you like. I felt like I could see you actually performing that as in a piece of acting, and I could see you watching that and laughing and smiling and going, "I love this."
You're right, boy, did I.
I don't know why he just went. It's like a full body spasm. Yeah. He's like Claude Akins like, and that's the great thing, that shows he understands how to act in those ape prosthetics, because the big trick is always overdoing it so it looks normal when it comes out of the ape mask. And so I think the idea of like doing what is like a human actor would do as like human character. He's still a human actor. A human character would do as like just a slight shake of the head. He does as a complete body freak out.
Yeah, you have to do it. You have to do it like Jim Carrey in The Mask, or Jim Carrey in anything.
It's like Wile E. Coyote. It's
exactly
full-on Tasmanian devil. And I gotta say, I mean, while we're talking about performances, Claude Akins, Paul Williams. This may be Roddy This may be Roddy McDowall's best performance. Yeah. Is that too weird to say?
I know.
Someone's gonna not like I said that, but it kind of true.
Well, and that's one of the things that I gravitated to was all the performances. The setup for the story at Ape Village to me is perfection. It is confounded by the idea of listen, this movie's got problems. You said you didn't like them going back to the city at all. I like
not. I think that I don't actually. I'll walk some of that back a little bit.
Okay,
but let's say 95%. Yes.
Fair enough. Like, you're not completely wrong. I like, from a writing standpoint, I like that they at least had this idea of Caesar wanting to know more about his history, his past, his family, his parents, that kind of thing.
I don't know if that's the way it's written, though.
To me, it felt like that's what it was, and it was
McDonald's
motivation
the one
enough.
Who's pushing it. McDonald's brother's the one who's pushing it.
But he's just like, isn't he just telling him, yes, I know where we can find some stuff?
Yeah, and again, part of the problem is, like how the script was written in the first place. So the original draft for the movie was all based in the city of Misfit Toys,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the sort of, you know, like the second act of the movie, really, with Caesar venturing back into the city, and, you know, fighting a war against the humans. And when he gets back to his village, you know, they've all sort of formed a new society without him and execute him. That was the original
Wow.
draft of the movie. But
As bleak as ever.
Well, that's it. And, you know, it was like bleakness on top of bleakness, because Conquest was, you know, similarly pessimistic. And so the brief from on high was very specifically, we want to make a family-friendly version of an Apes movie.
Right.
And that's where the Ape Village came from, which is interesting, both that, you know, it's exactly what keeps happening in this series. We go from a hopeless story to a story with some hope. And then we go back to a hopeless story, and then we go to a story with some hope.
Yeah.
So it fits that pattern perfectly. But also, I mean, it's very clear that everyone was all working on the same idea, that they were making a kid. In fact, J. Lee Thompson says it was a kid's picture. I was told to make a kid's picture out of this. But I mean, you know, that the ambiguity, the nihilism, you know, the political allegory and symbolism, it's all there.
Still
it's just
there.
Subtly woven through in a way that the previous movies, you know, go hit a bit harder with. So,
well, and
I know they were trying to soften everything, but there's something about this mythology and this formula that makes it impossible to completely take out the darkness.
Yeah, that requires
and
darkness.
It's a really nice, because, you know, I suppose the idea was that it feels family friendly because the Ape Village is some kind of utopia, but immediately we see
it's anything but.
It's like on the precipice between utopia and dystopia.
Right.
Like, very decidedly.
And the conflict is set up so well. I like that there's a human teacher. It's a little clunky that, in terms of the exposition of it, because clearly that teacher should know that the word no.
Yeah. It's hard to believe that this has not come up yet.
Yeah, exactly. That this has to be explained to him.
Well, it's been explained to us.
Right. I mean,
just as when Caesar comes into his own home with his friend and says, "You know my wife, Lisa."
Yeah.
My son.
It's my wife. Here's my son.
I
see them every
I'm in
day.
your home.
I see
I'm
them
your friend.
every day.
But it's
regardless, the setup, the conflict between Aldo and Caesar, the ideas behind it, the political ideology between the two men is really good.
It's very, like, it's all the core dramatic conflicts of the movie are located in the village. The racial and class
warfare,
between within ape society and also between the apes and the humans.
Yes.
So the whole village it's like a dramatic powder keg waiting to go off. And that's how it's played throughout the movie.
Correct.
And that's why everything else feels like a distraction to that, is because that...
And I'll agree
you've got
on this.
Everything you need in there.
Yeah.
You know?
I agree with you on that, but I still contend that I like the idea of the external force coming upon them. And I think they flub it a little bit. One, they flub Caesar leaving it all, despite that at least his... I like that I can understand him wanting to know more about his past, but considering what just happened with Aldo, I don't think I'd leave.
Yeah.
So that to me is weak.
There's a lot of as they used to say in Enid Blyton novels, a lot of comings and goings
that don't
really make sense in this movies. Like later on in the movies, the gorillas leave, because they have to leave. Right? Because in the story they have to leave.
Right.
But there's no reason there's no reason is given as to why they left. So it's got those problems. I think I'm not particularly against the idea of them venturing out to the city of misfit toys, but I think it's just as soon as they leave, it's very clear that, in Planet of the Apes we had this kind of vast exposition done over this amazing scenery.
Yeah.
At the Fox Ranch. Here, it's just like three people walking on a beach. And they walk over a hill, and there they are.
Well, I do have notes that...
And the movie cannot disguise that.
I do have notes that say things like, it's a 3 days journey from nuclear fallout. Doesn't seem far enough to go to not experience the nuclear fallout. For Ape Village.
Right.
The idea of this Geiger counter, like all the cameras within the island of misfit toys is still working and has motion sensors and that sort of thing. They are walking around in nuclear fallout with radiation, but don't worry about it, we're fine. Like, they take the time to, like, really worry about radiation in a way that makes you think they could be nothing other than exposed for too long. You know what I mean?
But, I mean, at least they pay lip service to it.
Right, exactly.
They're like, we can't, they put a timestamp on it, basically. They're like, if we don't get out by now, we'll have to wear caps for the rest of our lives.
Right.
We'll have to wear swimming caps for the rest of our lives. Which seems to be the only problem that this radiation has caused them.
Well, and we get, and right around here we see Severn Darden back as Culp. He's now our main bad guy. Because I think you alluded or said in our introductory episode, they couldn't get our main baddie.
They couldn't get anyone.
They couldn't get anyone, right.
Apart from Roddy McDowall and Natalie Trundy as Lisa. But, I mean, the first hint of this that it's definitely not the gang getting back together is the fact that we have a character called McDonald,
right,
who is both African American and physically, he's a James Franciscus to Charlton Heston.
Right,
it's the same. Yeah. He's another classic surrogate. He plays exactly the same role. He's exactly the same person. He just happens to be a different human being.
Right.
And it's another one of those moments where the movie's like anti-racist message comes undone when you start to put black people in the movie. Because it's just like, really? The two black guys we've seen are brothers in the last two, between the last two movies, that they're brothers?
Is it even narratively explained what happened to the original McDonald?
No.
I don't think so.
I think it just assumed that he gets swallowed up in the nuclear winter.
Right. That didn't happen to anyone else, including all the bad guys in this movie.
The other ones avoided. And Culp is the same thing, except that I think they've managed to keep the characteristics of Culp from the previous movie. He's not he doesn't suddenly become Don Murray's Breck. But what he still feels like the same character.
What I really did appreciate was when they discover that they have infiltrated their territory and they're chasing after them, and all of that feels motivated for his character because of what happened in the last movie. So you could understand him wanting revenge. But what I did like a lot was like the one human character that said, I don't think they're a danger to us. We could just let them go.
Yeah.
I really like that they just like there's little touches in this movie that matter a lot to me, and that's one of them.
It's a good performance.
Yeah.
He's in the previous movie he's a second rung villain, and he stays a second rung villain with all the same characteristics. And that's interesting until it gets the part where he has to, lead an army.
Right.
And then
lead an army of no people.
but I of three old men. But I like the way that he's first appeared, and that the quotable is from him.
Mm-hmm.
It's all been rather boring, hasn't
Yeah.
it? And he's over it. He's like
Right.
everyone else in
Exactly.
the city of misfit toys. It's like he's got, and this is it does make narrative sense that he's suddenly energized by this external threat,
Right.
and that's like an archetype of this series, is the sort of the defensive human.
Right.
It's like when there's no threat against you, right from Taylor at the beginning of the movie, when there's no threat against you and your existence, you wax lyrical about how terrible the world is and how it needs to be changed, and
yeah.
you're the biggest hippie in the world, and then as soon as your humanity is threatened in any way, you become a militaristic dick
Monster.
face. Yeah. And that's great that they're picking up on that thread. It's just because of the story they go on to tell, he feels very much like the leftovers.
Well, he is.
But they are literally the left. And again, that's not wrong. That's what they are. It's what they make them do, I think, towards the end of the movie that gets kind of problematic. And also, I think maybe it is all comparative. Maybe it is because I am enjoying so much of what's going on in that ape village that it's a real shame that they move away from it so quickly.
Right.
Because they establish everything so well. The core dramatic conflicts, the relationship between Caesar and his son, confusingly called Cornelius.
Right.
These brilliant supporting characters like Aldo, Mandamus, the guy who runs the armory, who is like
So
a full-on
good.
nihilist in the middle of this family movie. It's like a full-on fucking, nihilist character who won't let anyone, touch guns. His whole job is to give people guns, and he won't let anyone touch the guns.
And then he gives people guns but no ammunition. They're like, "Hey, can I have some bullets, please?"
It's like established. So I just wish we'd just stay. It with the budget limitations, with the fact that everything is just so low energy and low stakes because the people in the city of misfit toys cannot do anything. That's the way they're written. They're basically dead. They're medically dead.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell. I mean, the escape from the city, and that's one of the low points of the series for me.
Yeah. I won't disagree there.
They're people who don't fight. They're too sick to fight. They fall over at the drop of a hat. I mean, what's the stakes here? They can be defeated by hoses.
I was going to say.
Once again, J. Lee Thompson is underlighting it, probably to disguise a multitude of budget sins.
Right.
But, but I also, I like you, I like the parallel. I like the fact that there are these two warring communities. And one is a kind of... I like the mirroring in this movie. I like the fact that, there's a mirror and a parallel to everything.
Right. To me, you have to have this existential or outside threat coming back, and I guess for me the big sin of this movie is at the end. Well, or maybe I should save it. I don't know, but
save
right.
it. Yeah, save it for the
But
it's
at any rate, I just wish that because the conflict in Ape Village is set up so well, I wish the not the resolution, but the manner in which they come together felt more purposeful, as opposed to just like scatter and fight. But but we'll get there.
We'll definitely get. But it's what your enjoyment of this movie forced me to realize was like how sophisticated the drama is in Ape Village.
Yeah,
because we have a discussion about disability and ableism when Caesar's son is he says, "I'm going to be malformed," and there's everything to do with cultural appropriation, with the humans teaching apes their own history. It's just, and again, really subtly done with nuance, so you almost don't notice how progressive and interesting it is. I think one of the major
that's one of the things.
there,
I think this movie, I think it projects itself as simple, but I think there are
very much so.
But there are
it's for kids.
But there are so many interesting ideas behind it that on a first viewing you might not notice or give credence or credit to, and it deserves it.
It absolutely deserves it. I'd say one of the biggest letdowns for me, which is not surprising given that it's an early 1970s movie, but is surprising given how much heed we've paid to feminism in previous movies, is the character of Lisa, Caesar's wife. She's simply a homemaker.
You're right, and that is it.
The female apes through, from Zera onwards previously have been represented as professionals and heroines, proactive, scientific, and we get none of that from her, and it's a real shame because Natalie Trundy's back, and
I know
she doesn't.
The unsung hero of this series.
Yeah, she's done as many ape movies as Roddy McDowall.
Right.
All told.
But playing far more, or not far more, but more characters.
But also speaking to the idea that it was trying to appear simple, it was trying to appear family friendly, and I think we mentioned this in the ranking episode. This is Planet of the Little House on the Prairie.
Yeah, right.
But what you were saying about, it appears simple, but actually it's a really interesting piece of drama. I watched Little House on the Prairie throughout my childhood, and that's exactly how I felt about it.
Yeah, right.
Like, it's the same it's exactly the same dynamic. It's like, here's this cozy kind of old-timey show and I'm like, yeah, but they all die of cholera. And it's like, and there's an episode which is a slasher film in miniature, and the prairie's a scary place as well.
Yeah.
And there's a scene in this, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but there's a scene with Cornelius chasing a raccoon around the trees. First of all, it's an ape swinging through a tree, which we've not seen yet, so I'm glad they got that in before the series was over. And there is an episode of Little House on the Prairie which is about a rabid raccoon called Jasper. That's how much I remember it. I remember the name of the raccoon.
That's impressive.
It was a brilliant episode. I remember it because it was pure suspense. Because one of the girls was bitten by a rabid raccoon that they thought was this sort of pet raccoon they had called Jasper. And then, Michael Landon's about to kill this raccoon. And then at the very last minute, the raccoon does like a little movement that tells you it's Jasper. And he goes, Jasper? And for some reason, like those two, in that moment of this movie, those two pieces of fiction kind of
live in peril, live.
But that's exactly what they were going for. Like, exactly that kind of...
Right.
And, after he chases that raccoon down the branch, a gorilla murders him. So, it's the same level of darkness, but it's wrapped up in a family-friendly package. It doesn't mean it's any less chilling. And people who
and that's the thing to me, was that what...
Little House on the Prairie as a kid, they still remember it to this day like it's a Michael Myers movie.
Oh, interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's enough. That's enough Little House on the Prairie, but I think, and knowing that they were going to make a TV series, I also wonder whether they're kind of piloting. I wonder whether this was a sort of pilot for what they wanted to do with the TV series. They went down a different route with the TV series. They went more Starsky and Hutch.
Right.
But I do wonder whether they were thinking ahead to I wonder if we could do a TV series about this. They probably should have done. They probably wouldn't have got cancelled.
How long did that series go for?
13 episodes.
And that's it. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Mike, it's really good.
Is it?
It's like really good. But it's stupid 70s action. It's like it's just people punching each other for 10 minutes. It's really like it's one of my fondest memories of watching TV as a kid was watching that show. But I think if they'd gone with like, Tales of the Ape Village, it would have worked better as a show.
Interesting.
It would have run as long as Little House
on the Prairie,
which was
right.
like, what, 50 years? I don't know. Somewhere between 10 years and 50 years, I don't know. All I know is those kids were like 30 by the time the show
ended. All right, well, let's...
If you're anything like me, you spend the majority of the day wondering whether you want coffee, beer, or wine. Whichever way you fall, Brew Bar has you covered. Located in the heart of 3rd Avenue Village in glorious downtown Chula Vista, California, which is also my neck of the woods, Brew Bar is a coffee shop, bar, and eatery rolled into one delightful package. Tim and Alex run the place, and let me tell you, listeners, these guys know their coffee. And after you've been in their company, so will you. They turned me on to pour over, and it's literally all I drink now. If for some crazy reason you don't want to try the best coffee in the world, they've got espresso drinks, all kinds of teas, and even coffee cocktails. You heard me? Coffee tails. And we're just getting started. Bottle service on craft beer and wine, alcoholic and caffeinated potions, an all-day food menu with plenty of vegan options. All served up in an atmosphere hip enough to know you're getting the best quality, but not too hip that you feel the need to drive to 7-Eleven and get a bucket of brown swill. Brew Bar. It's the best place to be for beer, wine, coffee, and tea. And if you go, you might even see me.
And we're back once again, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here discussing Battle for the Planet of the Apes, the last installment of the Apes movies. All right. I want to talk about this because there's a couple of things that happen in this movie that really put it over the top for me.
Great.
One of them is this that I think sets up the whole second half of this movie is when Caesar, when he has this conversation.
I keep wanting to call
I
him
know,
Cornelius
exactly.
too.
When he has a discussion with Lisa about the nature of man and understanding and war. Do you remember that scene?
Yes, I do.
I
yeah.
mean,
It's a great scene.
That was a great piece of writing to me.
A great piece
And-
of writing, and
Go ahead.
Carry on. No, it's interesting because, again, the intention was to soften the character of Caesar after the ending of Conquest of Planet of the Apes, where he is full revolutionary.
Yeah.
At least up until the last 10 seconds of the movie.
Right.
But I mean, in the overall arc of Caesar, in the
That's
these
what I
movies,
like.
It's development. It reads more like development. It
Right.
reads more like he has a revolutionary period, and now
He understands the
combined
cost
both
of it,
views.
though.
He understands both viewpoints, now.
Right.
But he's still not swayed by either. He's still not afraid. That's the thing. It's like it kind of. Not that the movie glosses over this, but the society that they're living in glosses over the fact that the humans are still basically the prisoners of the apes.
Mm-hmm.
Prisoners with
Benefits, with
basically.
a few rights.
With a few rights, and in the course of this movie, and this is why
So
such
that's
great
the
drama,
idea behind it
that
is
is
the
revealed
benevolent
through the storytelling.
Right. There's like a benevolent dictatorship.
Right. Once they get locked in that corral, it's very clear, where the power dynamic lies.
Of course.
And I'm going to go out there and say, this movie doesn't get any credit for doing political allegory, but I cannot see that scene without thinking of World War II Japanese internment.
Well, I also
humans-
was equating it to
Concentration camps?
No, but kids being stripped from their parents and being put in cages just in the last few years.
That's something. That is why I think maybe you were more favorable seeing it for the first time in 2021, because there's so much in that Ape Village that it feels like everything is on a knife edge.
Yeah, I think
between
you're
different
probably
warring
right about
factions
that.
in society.
Yeah,
No, that's a great thing, because that means that.
but
this
that means
movie
it's
has a-
speaking to the world we live in today, which is a
and
good
just,
piece of
just
drama.
truth about how society
right,
works.
exactly.
Because that's we're exactly this society, America, Western society is right now on this precipice between utopia and dystopia. It could literally flip both ways in a matter of months.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this is all about. But what's kind of interesting about it is it feels more utopian than if the everyday living of it feels like we're living in a utopia. But you scratch that surface even a little, and everyone is at war with each other, with what's going on outside, with what's going on within.
Mm-hmm.
It's really
Well, and I think
beautifully constructed central premise.
right, and the differing ideas between Caesar and Aldo, the political ramifications of those ideas, the manner in which they wish to govern those that are not like them around them.
Yeah.
All feel, I think, without even giving it conscious thought, I think you're right in the sense that I could equate all of that to what we're dealing with today, and in that way, it became like a political allegory for me that resonated so much, in a way that was both deeply entertaining and forces you to be reflective.
And my theory is that, the previous movies maybe speak better to their own times than this one, but because they work so hard in this movie to get the characterizations right, for it to have an authentic emotional center, that the truth kind of echoes from that, not the other way around.
Right.
Actually, even in that documentary I've been talking about, Ricardo Montalban says much the same thing. He says that the characters, the reason these movies last is because the characters feel real.
Mm-hmm.
And nowhere is that more true than this movie.
Well, and there's one singular moment that I've been waiting to talk about, and it's the moment when his son dies.
No, I don't want to talk about it, because it's so good.
Yeah.
And I have a son. I don't want to talk about it. No, really, I teared up. It's the first time I've teared up watching it, and it's no coincidence. It's the first time I've watched it since
you became a father.
Since I became a father. It's just, it's just great acting. It's well written.
But it's also, like, to me, it was one of the... And like, none of these movies are poorly directed. But...
No.
I noticed a care in that one particular scene that really stuck out to me. The choices that J. Lee Thompson makes during that scene. For those that don't know, what's his son's name?
Cornelius.
Oh, that's right, Cornelius. Fucking.
Because why use another name?
God.
We're all familiar with that one.
Cornelius is spying, but not...
He's being a kid.
He's just being a kid, exactly.
He was chasing a raccoon.
Right.
He stumbled upon
So he stumbles
apes.
upon the military coup being talked about, and he does it, the curiosity of a child brings him up into a tree, and Aldo sees this and essentially kind of shakes him off, and he
cuts down the tree.
Or that's
with a
right,
machete.
that's right.
The branch, so that's murder.
Yeah.
He knew what was going to happen.
Ugh. So, and Cornelius falls, and he doesn't die straight away, but he hits the ground.
Yeah.
The air is sucked out of not the room, but where they are. And the
Yeah, ape shall not
camera
kill ape.
is above these bushes and doesn't pan down, it moves down.
Mhm.
And then it moves to the right to a space between two sets of bushes. And Aldo tells the gorillas to get out, and then he runs through that space past the camera, and then there's the child lying on the ground. It's
Yeah, it's beautifully
heartbreaking.
done.
It's so beautifully shot.
It breaks my heart quite genuinely. Yeah. And I mean, it's powerful acting. The scene when he actually, later on dies
With his mother and father.
and sees us by his bedside. It's powerful acting from Roddy McDowall, but you also have to add in that he's doing that through ape makeup,
Exactly.
which makes it doubly impressive. But it would be impressive regardless. But what keeps it back from being just wallowing in mawkish sentimentality is what it means on a bigger scale.
Right.
Because, and this is where I think, again, the drama of this movie is so well constructed, is they've taken something which is really just a footnote in the original movie, which is that the scriptures say ape shall never kill ape.
It's the law,
And-
Tom. It's the law.
Right. It is, yeah. But no, in the what I mean is in the original movie, it's not made much of.
Yeah, right.
But here, it's the along with no. I guess the last two movies have been no. This is the sense. So basically, you're doing what all good sequels do, which is you're building on a latent idea from a previous movie, and you make that the center of your story. And with Ape Shall Never Kill Ape, they do that really well, because that's what changes things in their society. It's like, what happens when ape does inevitably kill ape?
Yeah.
And it's the ramifications of it are really well teased out.
Yeah.
Because it's a significant moment both emotionally and in the overall story.
It's connected to both.
And none of this has anything to do with the school bus
Exactly.
and the
Right.
old Chevy that is coming towards.
But
the
I
ape.
still contend that what's interesting is because it's not until the battle's over that we have the chant of ape killed ape. Ape killed ape. Ape killed ape.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what I liked about this movie. Now, I wish that I wish they handled it better, because yes, the humans come, the misfit toys come, and there is a battle for the planet of the apes, such as it is.
Such as it is.
Constrained,
Well,
but
can we talk about that?
yeah,
battle?
please.
Okay. So
Anything you say, you're gonna be right about. Okay?
I'm not just here to do it down. I'll preface this with what I think is great.
All right.
And what I think really works is what we're doing is we're mirroring Beneath the Planet of the Apes here. So the humans are attacking the ape city. In Beneath the Planet of the Apes, it was the apes attacking the human city. And we're going from underground to overground. If previously it was overground, so we're doing it's a classic inversion, which works really well in the big scheme of the series. It's a really nice
And is this the
inversion.
first sequel inversion?
No,
Well,
Escape.
I mean, I guess we've done it before in this series, but every time we bring this up, we're talking about how this series invented all the language we're talking about for this podcast, which is so amazing to me.
Well, you know what we're going to have to do? We're going to have to go back farther in time and
See
solve
it.
that.
Yeah, see.
You get some, do some deeper research. But for now, let's say provisionally, this is the earliest we've seen
So great.
of that. But they're doing that, and now the apes are they're the ones who have, excuse the pun, guerrilla tactics. Guerrilla, Guere, in the same way the humans had their guerrilla
You don't have to
tactics.
condescend to me. I know what gorilla you were talking about.
This is an audio format, Mike. I can't spell out the word gorilla as I say it. There's got to be some concession to that. But I mean, it's been said many times that the budget limitations, the inability to show an advancing military force, the fact that they made it trench warfare, which just underlines how
Sure.
underwhelming it all is. It's a school bus and a couple of cars.
Well, and the way it's shot, there are
People are
moments
walking
like...
faster than the vehicles, walking alongside the vehicles and walking faster.
I have notes like, why are all the apes carrying furniture? And then I realize, oh, they're building a barricade. Wouldn't you have done that beforehand?
It's just, yes, but it looks like, tell you what it reminds me of, Mad Max on its original budget.
Yeah, right.
And you know what? Do you know what depresses me the most? There's
I'm
first
almost
of all,
afraid to ask.
It takes them. I don't know what the relative timelines are between Ape Village and the human city, but it looks like it takes them an entire night to get through the door. First of all,
Right.
just to get out the door. They have their apocalyptic convoy, which is led by a school bus. And in the background, you can see one of the very old men as well. They're not only sick, they're old, right? They're like old geriatric.
It could have been called Battle Against the Senior Citizens on the Planet of the Apes.
Battle for the battle for Florida, basically, is what it is.
Battle for tennis ball laden walkers.
And there's someone fixing a car engine in the background. And when I see that, I don't know whether that was meant to be in the movie or not. And that's a problem. That works just as well as an outtake as it does a representation of this
world
group as a
right.
military force. Yeah. And so it's just, I mean, it's completely laughable all the way through. They at one point they even try compensate for it in the script by saying they're creating a smoke screen.
Yeah.
We all know why they're creating a smoke screen.
So that we
you can't see
what's going on as the audience.
And also, why are all these classic models of cars and buses? Because they all come out of an advanced future society.
You wanted the flying cars?
Well, no, but in my headcanon, they had to break into a classic car museum to
Right.
get these, because all their vehicles would have been like 20 years, like 50 years past this.
Right.
But so it's problematic.
Well, to say the least, yes. I mean,
To say the least.
and we've given plenty of play about the tree that blows up 12 times.
Yeah.
But
I will say, and this is another great piece of inversion. The Culp Caesar reunion. I'm really glad that Culp gets all the way into the village,
Right.
so he can be face to face with Caesar. Because, well, first of all, first of all, the face to face in the previous movie was not him. But so I'm glad that he gets a moment with Caesar. Like, he's never had a moment with Caesar. But it's also it's a given that this is an inversion of Beneath the Planet of the Apes. This is Zeus. This is a reversal of Zeus meets Taylor. It's exactly the same dynamic, and it's a beautiful moment. And I like that he gets his Culpuppins, I suppose.
well played.
But again. It's interesting. Like, once you break this movie, you feel like this movie is upbeat and is pacifistic. But when you actually break it down, there's some real ambiguity there, because the humans,
Right.
the surviving humans, are released by Caesar, and and he says to Virgil, "No, let them go," and then the gorillas get them,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not quite sure how you're supposed to feel about that. Like, we know the gorillas are also the villains, but so who's the bigger villain? And I think that's deliberate.
Yeah, no, I do too.
I feel like this movie's like, I feel like in whatever measure of making these
Like I
movies,
said,
ambiguity is still the watchword of how they're writing and directing.
Like I
these
said
movies.
earlier, if I felt like we were seeing any people in that bus, the gorillas shooting into that bus would be horrifying. Like, it's incredibly violent.
But I mean, once it's all over and done with, once the school bus has departed, that's how you know a war is over.
Yeah, right.
When the school bus
When the
leaves.
school bus leaves, the battle is done.
We get into the thick of the chamber drama in the village.
Yes.
Like, all that's left is everything in the movie.
Right. It's
like-
the
it's
important
like-
shit in the movie, right.
Yeah. Maybe that's it. Maybe they would, they just didn't want to write a scene where Culp goes back to the city and it's like, okay.
Well, and I said
guess
I'd
we
give
go back
reference to it
I
because...
guess we go back to sitting in bunk beds
Yeah.
all our lives.
And well, don't we have before the battle starts, don't we have a scene where, like, all the humans are already locked up, correct?
Yeah, so they get locked
And-
in the corral by the gorillas
the
before the
gorillas.
gorillas inexplicably leave.
And I guess I wish what I wanted from this movie in that moment, because it's kind of like, oh no, they're here, we have to fight. And I just wanted one thing between, like, Aldo and Caesar that says, we have to come together right now. This isn't finished, but we have to come together right now. I just wish there could have been something a little more to that.
I think it fits. I mean, it's an interesting thing because, one of the more accidental themes of this series is ape racism. Like,
Right.
It's the most racist society you'll ever see. And I kind of like, again, given where we are now in 2021, I'm not feeling in a forgiving mood for people who staged a military coup in society. Like, I feel like that ship has sailed.
Right.
And I kind of feel like when I watch this, I'm like, nah, fuck them. Fuck those gorillas. They made their bed.
Wait, the gorillas or
and,
the humans?
Well, it's really just Aldo,
Or is it
isn't
both?
It's Aldo's leadership.
Yeah.
And then the film does make that distinction that it because once the gorillas see that, like, they killed Caesar's kid, they're like,
Oh.
okay, maybe need to take a
Fuck.
back seat here. Let's
Now, well- Not all of us knew about that.
yeah, exactly. Well, we all saw it, but yeah, sure, we'll feign like we didn't. It's time to back off. And it's interesting because, there are pluses to the theatricality of this movie, but there are also minuses, which is that, it does sometimes feel like a stage play in a not good way.
You think?
Like when they reenact Cornelius's tree death. It's like, again, we're going back to the same tree,
Right.
the same idea. We filmed it already. We've already got the setup.
Yeah.
I mean, symbolically, it works perfectly. But I don't know if this is the fudging you're talking about, and it's a fudging they do in a lot of movies where they're not brave enough to make the lead character commit an act of violence, but it does look more like self-defense in the way that Aldo is killed.
Yeah.
So they get around
Ape
not having to kill Ape in revenge.
Yeah.
I don't know what the scriptures say about apes killing apes in revenge for killing
Exactly.
other apes. Maybe that's the
Can
asterisk
Ape kill
at the
Ape
bottom of the
as
scriptures.
punishment?
But they get around that by having it look like Aldo, tried to kill Caesar and Caesar defended himself. And it's a little bit of a fudge, but they've got a lot of dramatic work to do to sort of
To wrap
sort
up
of
this
get
story, yeah.
But then the great moment is once this is done, you're like, great, everything's resolved. The humans are like, we're still
locked
in
up and
concentration
we
camps.
need we need some more rights. The fuck are you guys doing?
I love that they use this. I think it's the revelation that Aldo killed Cornelius, but McDonald's brother says, "I guess they just joined the human race."
Yeah.
And I think it's like this series cannot resist one more sly dig at humanity, even in a scene which is just apes killing other apes. But it's also, I mean, there was also a little bit of human privilege in the way that, like, if you think about it over the course of the series, the humans are demanding rights that the apes never had.
Never, ever were given.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a little bit of, like, we're entitled to this.
Yeah.
Well,
it's dressed up in any living creature deserves this. But that's
right.
It's undercut.
That's a very human concept.
It's a very human concept, but it's undercut by all the racism implicit throughout this entire series.
Right.
So,
yeah, it would have been. I mean, I think this is pie in the sky thinking, but it would have been interesting to draw a parallel to how the chimpanzees treat the gorillas to how the apes treat the humans. You can infer that, but ape racism is largely unspoken in this series.
right.
Everyone's just fine with it. But one character somehow we've skipped over is Virgil the orangutan.
I know.
I think he's one of the best characters in the whole series.
It really is.
Certainly one of the best performances.
Paul Williams
he's our science guy, isn't he? He's our Q in this.
He is.
He's there with the time travel theory. He's got all the human history. I don't know how he learned to speak and become a super intelligent being in 10 years. That's where the
that
timeline
is
gets
one hell of a school they've got.
You could transfer all your credits from that school to the next place, couldn't you? He's got to Virgil teaches the teachers.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's funny, and he's like long-winded. Shades of Armando.
So charming.
He's very, very, very charming, and and then he's an ape of action as well. Later on, he's the one who he gets the drop on. He would have gunned down that school bus if Caesar had let him. And I think in a movie like this, where the emotional center of the movie matters more than perhaps it's done in previous movies. I think it's you need characters like that. You need a solid supporting cast,
and this movie has
This movie definitely delivers
it absolutely has that.
But individualized characters as well, and it never fails to amaze me in this series that they keep coming up with original, distinctive characters every time
in each sequel.
Yes, they're all based on they're all based on an archetype,
right?
But
and you don't see that specifically. You don't see that in sequels.
No.
Yeah.
Well, we know for a fact.
I'll say.
But because he's a foreshadow of Dr. Zaius. He is the Dr. Zaius in his society, but in this alternate timeline, Dr. Zaius has gone down the science path, and theology doesn't really matter to him. He's a literalist. He believes in time travel. He believes in history. And theology never really again.
True.
Theology's gone again, except in the framing narrative, where it's very important.
Yes, true.
So once again, the series cannot bridge that gap between science and religion.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, but I do want to talk just before we finish here, because this movie's bookended by The Lawgiver and John Huston.
Yes. It's a lot to say here, isn't
Oh my gosh. I have never more thoroughly enjoyed seeing a statue of Caesar crying as...
How many times have you seen this? You say it as if you've had a lot of experience of this very thing.
Well, but it's up because it's Iron Eyes Cody. It's the crying Indian influence of a commercial that I think came out in 1971.
I hadn't put that together, but you're absolutely right.
So they're directly referencing it, and it's just like, to me, it's like the chef's kiss ending to this movie, where they're like, yeah, let's dig into that. Everybody loves that.
It's
single
both,
tear.
It's but what's great about that is you're absolutely right. That is the most contemporary reference that they're pulling. But it's also more and less than that within the context of the series. You can't help but think of the bleeding eyes,
right?
The blood
Beneath.
tears of the whatever he's called at that point in that timeline, of the statue in Beneath the Planet of the Apes that tumbles, which again is one of the darkest images of the series. Right. And of course, you know, I mean, it's also a very Catholic piece of imagery, you know, that and Jesus wept, and that image of religious sculptures with tears, and it being, you know, the blood and the water of Jesus. All that is mixed in there. But you know, it again, and this again was definitely deliberate because people who made the movie talked about it. They wanted to throw the audience once more. You know, they'd lured them into believing that they've made a family-friendly movie, but they wanted to end on a note of ambiguity that speaks more to the series as a whole. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, what does that mean? Is Caesar crying because he failed or because he succeeded? And why is that statue crying?
Well, stay tuned for my pitch a sequel.
but besides, I mean, this is also where, like, the present day of the movie. But
it feels very Christ the Redeemer. You know, it's got that.
But it also brings the contemporary world into focus because you have humans. We basically. Again, it's another fake out. You think that you think he's addressing the audience, but he's actually addressing an audience of human and ape children in a mixed school in the future. Right. So we're immediately thinking about, like, desegregating schools. Of course, you know, the humans are African American because that's what this series does, but they're also trying to make a point of, like, we're in the early 70s. We don't know where the future's going. You know, the ambiguity that this series is ending on is also about the ambiguity of our own time. It's like, can we bridge our own racial and class conflicts in our own society? So they bring that back into focus in a big, which I think is like, whoa, you know, it's like a real pullback. Like, whoa. I mean, there's cause for optimism, but it's also like, you know, the little girl asked the question, you know, lawgiver who knows about the future.
Right.
Which, you know, if you wanted a tagline for this series,
boy,
you
is
got
that
it right there.
Yeah.
This series does not know what's going to happen about the future, and it could go either way. But yeah, I mean,
good
I guess
shit.
you could also, you know, you could sort of say that it's a little bit out of character, a little bit mawkish. Even for this movie, but I think it's there for the sake of ambivalence.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, absolutely capitalizing on the currency of that ionized codeine commercial for sure. And they're heading into television, so.
Right? Yeah.
And then the music at the
credit
the
check
credits,
us, Tom. Come on.
Well, there's not really again. There's nothing to check, but. The credits come over the image rather than before they fade to black, which I think is the first time that's happened in the series.
That sounds right to me, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a sense, you know, it's like preserving, you know, over an image of ambivalence. There's sentimental notes in that final piece of music, but it's also a very dark piece of underscoring that sounds a lot like the original theme. So musically, you're getting everything that ending is giving you, but reinforced, or you know, with audio.
Interesting.
So it's a very well made movie, even in the parts of the movie that
I found it to be a very
couldn't avoid being problematic.
What I liked about it so much,
it's still well made.
I found it to be a very thoughtful movie.
It's an extremely thoughtful movie, and it, I guess, with the brief make a kid's picture, it doesn't need to be. mean, we know how that's gone in the, Phantom Menace. But we know how that's gone when people have tried to kidify their franchises, and that's what they were trying to do here. And yet they
But
come
they
out
can't
with
help
a movie
themselves,
that's
can
just,
they? Like
they can't help themselves. It's this like, you had to go with the crying Caesar at the end, did you? Couldn't have the little girl running down the hill like in
Like
Little House on the Prairie,
right?
could you?
All right. Anything left for you?
No,
Me
it's,
either.
I think it's just about as long as the movie.
Yeah,
probably.
exactly.
We discussed this and.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you have something to add for Battle for the Planet of the Apes, please let us know. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Send us an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. For Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions, Michael Shantz here of the How Dare You Awards. You'll be hearing our pitches next. Say goodbye, Tom.
The school bus will be operational, Governor.
Couldn't resist.
I don't think it was. I think school buses move faster than that.
Ideally.
Even when it's transporting children.
All right, everyone. Take care.